fix this. Okay, so welcome to this webinar. It is organized by the Thematic Working Group on Rural Youth Employment of the Global Donor Platform for Rural Development. So my name is Ji-Yeun, and I'm the head of the Climate and Development Unit at the OECD Development Center, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of this Thematic Working Group, together with Jenna Testel from YPART. Just click this here. Okay, so development organizations are navigating a period of deep uncertainty, and some estimate that official development assistance could decrease by 30% by 2027 compared to 2023, where it was at its highest. But in fact, this downward trend started a little before the recent policy change from the US. France, Germany, and UK also had started cutting back on ODA between 10-20% since 2023. So if we expect this sort of downward trend to continue, financing for food system transformation, including programs for rural youth employment, will experience further gaps. So is the youth agenda in danger? And what progress has been made towards youth employment issues, and what challenges remain? To discuss this issue, we have the pleasure to welcome Sara Elder, head of the Employment Analysis and Economic Policies Unit at the International Labour Organization. She's also the lead author of the Global Employment Trends for Youth, so Sara will set the scene for us on the situation of youth. And then we will hear from 3 representatives from development banks who will give us their perspectives on how development banks are addressing youth employment challenges and also handling competition with other investment priorities. And so let me introduce you quickly to our speakers. From the African Development Bank, I'd like to welcome Edson Mpyisi, Chief Financial Economist and Coordinator of the Enable Youth Program. And from the Islamic Development Bank, we welcome Ousmane Diaby. He's the lead youth empowerment specialist, women and youth empowerment. And from IFAD, please welcome Rahul Antao, technical specialist for rural youth and social inclusion. So for the scene setting, Sara, please, you have the floor.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ji-Yeun, and thank you for the invitation. It's my great pleasure to join you. As we said, I have what I consider to be the easier job, which is setting the scene. But we think it's so important to remind ourselves. I mean, some of what I say might be obvious, but we need to remember what we are talking about when we talk about investing in youth employment, and especially as you said, if resources start to get more and more scarce, then we want to make sure we're putting the resources in the right place. So I will get started with my sharing. Okay, hope this do this right. Okay, you should see my screen. Give me a nod. Okay, great. We're moving ahead. And as Ji-Yeun also said, I will be starting from my source here is the ILO Global Employment Trends for Youth, which is a report that we put out every 2 years. The latest one was in 2024, and that one actually was our 20th year anniversary. So we thought we would take a little bit of an extra twist on that one, presenting not just the current trends, but also discussing a bit more of the longer term trends. What has changed for young people over the 2 decades since we've been reporting on this topic? Here you have some links, which is some blatant self-promotion. We did also some regional briefs there, and you can find them on the website. Next. So we have many old and new challenges for young people. I mean, we all know that a lot of change has changed in the world over the past 20 years. And some changes have been positive, like more young people are now able to get an education. But then we have some changes that are probably a bit, maybe we don't want to say negative, but they cause a great deal of stress for young people. For example, there's the whole unknown of AI technologies and what that's going to mean for the jobs of young people. The report picks up on some of these issues, many of which are listed on the screen here. But the main point I think that we keep coming to is that the global economy is a very uncertain place right now, and young people feel a bit insecure about what their pathway is going to be. So that's one of the things that we keep running across when we talk to young people. And as an international organization, we feel quite strongly that it's our job to reassure young people. We need to remind them that hope is alive. They will find their way. We can give them a helping hand, certainly, but the future is theirs, and in fact, they need to be driving the circumstances. And one thing that we say has not changed over the last 20 years is that young people remain the disadvantaged group in the labor market. And it's for this reason that we really need to make sure we have the strong institutionalized support to put them on the road to the bright future that they very much deserve. So I'm going to start with some of the good news. And this is the obvious question. Has recovery from the COVID-19 crisis now arrived? And here we say, yes, absolutely it has. In fact, not just is the global youth unemployment rate at 12.8% in 2024, now back below where it was before the COVID crisis hit. This represents a 15-year low, which means that, we can now say COVID is well behind us, but we've gone even further than the COVID recovery. But does it mean that the picture is completely rosy? Absolutely not. And that's where we find some sort of cracks in the rosiness. And one thing that it's always very important to remind ourselves of is that this recovery was never universal. We have most of the regions that are now well below where they were before the crisis hit, but there were 3 regions that had not yet reached recovered the youth unemployment rates of 2019. These regions were the Arab states, East Asia, and Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So, of course, East Asia, a big part of the story is China, where the youth unemployment rate really skyrocketed over the last couple of years, although they're doing a lot of good work now to get that back under control. But there's always a great deal of regional variety, and it's very important to think about the context in which you're working. So you'll see youth unemployment rate in the Arab states and North Africa exceeds 20%, compared to where we would almost talk about full employment in North America, for example. But you'll also see a very low youth unemployment rate in sub-Saharan Africa. Does it mean all young Africans are working and working well? Absolutely not. We know that's very much not the case. Now, since this is a meeting on rural development, I also wanted to put a slide here on what we talk about when we talk about rural issues and where young people sit in the rural environment. And here we have an interesting breakdown. What I liked about these figures is it shows that youth unemployment is always a very small sliver of the youth population. So we need to make sure that we're not concentrating on youth unemployment alone. We are concentrating on reaching those who are the potential labor force. You'll see in the rural areas, most young people, this is 15 to 24, most young people are already working. 71% of young people are already working. This is, I should have said at the beginning, Uganda. This is a picture of Uganda. So in Uganda, 71% of young people in rural areas are working. Are they working well? We know very well that they're not, and they could use a lot of support to help get the social protection that can make sure that their work is giving them a livelihood rather than just a job. And I put the urban picture here just for comparison, but it's very important to remember if we are reaching young people, it's very much about transforming the jobs that they're doing into decent work. Now we have another indicator that I'm sure you all are familiar with. This is the share of young people who are neither in employment, education, or training. And we like this indicator because it gives us a bit of the bigger picture. So if the youth unemployment rate is only 12.8%, it's a fairly small number in the grand scheme of things. But we have this youth NEET rate, which reminds us that still 1 in 5 young people around the globe are NEETs, are young NEETs. And in most places, this is very much a gender storyline. So 2 in 3 young NEETs globally are female. And most of these young women are either unable to go to school or unable to enter the labor market because they're already engaged in some form of unpaid care work within the household. And our big challenge as practitioners is to bring these young people back into the labor market. And doing so requires very specific interventions that will help them to overcome the barriers that keep them at home. It is not an easy target group to reach, but if we really want to make a dent in the youth NEET rates, that is exactly where we need to go. So then we come to the many challenges on the quality of work, which I've already alluded to. You'll see that we've made very little progress in decent job creation in the developing world, and it's a very frustrating picture when we see that today still only 1 in 5 young workers in a low-income country has access to a regular secure job. And this is compared to, you can look at the exact opposite side of the scale. In a high-income country, 4 in 5 young workers, young adult workers, are in a secure job. I mean, this is a massive divide. And still, it's about building the institutions so that young people can get a job that pays them a decent living and gives them some security so they can and then invest in themselves and their future. So there's also lots of stories that we tell around the skills of young people. And it's quite a complicated story here. So on the one side, you have, as I said, young people are becoming increasingly educated. Yet there's still a lot of work to be done in developing economies. And you'll see that a majority of young workers in lower income countries are still classified as undereducated for the job. So our interventions here will be about scaling up the support measures that link young people to the skills base and build up their skills base. But on the other hand, we find that there's a really increasing share of young people who are becoming overeducated for the job that they do. The reason that this happens is that you do not have economies transforming themselves fast enough to create the type of jobs that the higher educated young graduate would want. So if you have an increasing number of young graduates, they have expectations about the type of jobs that they want to take up. The economy is not making enough of those jobs. That's the reality. This is why we have high unemployment rates amongst graduates, why you have a brain drain, and why you have a great deal of frustration amongst those young persons who have done the exact right thing that society has told them to do. Stay in school, get your engineering degree, you will benefit. And when they emerge into the labor market and find that there are very long queues for jobs, they get extremely frustrated. So as I say, the skills story is a bit complicated, and we need to be careful when we talk about it that we're getting the story right. Another very important topic is Africa. I mean, Africa, where you have a very youthful population. In fact, it's the only region where we still have a growing youth population and where you will have an increasing youth labor force between 2030 and 2050. It is where the jobs of the future will be. So the question is, why are not more companies investing in Africa where they will find the workers? And there's a lot that's to be said for young African economies to be protecting and nurturing this very rich asset that they have in their young workers, and hope that the world will come to them. But you need to make sure that they have the right skills base and that they have the infrastructure from which they can really blossom. Okay, so there's a lot on the table, and young people feel very much the weight of the world on their shoulders. And in the report, we share a lot of the perception surveys. I'm not going to go into much of the findings here, but it is very much the case that young people are worried about job loss, which is ironic when we said that youth unemployment is not such a big issue when they worried about job loss, but I think they're also very worried about job security. And much of the jobs being temporary in nature, excluded from social protection, it's no wonder that there seems to be this disconnect where a job used to be a stepping stone to financial independence and thriving adulthood. That connection has become a little bit lost. And I would love to hear amongst those in the virtual room today about how we can make this better. I'm almost through. Very quickly, I'll get us to the slide of moving ahead. There's so much on how we can address the situation of youth employment, and we have our roadmaps. All of us have our roadmaps, but we need to remember our roadmap is not just about skilling young people. It's not just about addressing the supply of young people. It's very much about keeping job growth happening, creating jobs for the future, and creating jobs that young people will want to have. And then, of course, we have all of the services that make sure that young people have the school to work transition that's as effective and efficient as possible. Inclusiveness, I'll let you all read this, but really, I don't want to spend too much time on this at all because I would really love to hear from those of you on the panel, those working in the banks, as to the work that you're doing and how you situate yourself in these realms. And let's continue the great work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, lots of sort of aspirational, how to say, hope at the beginning, but we have to be mindful that the devil is in the details. And you and I, we worked 10 years ago on school to work transition surveys, and I see that the aspiration gap continues to remain high. And I mean, there's really still a lot to do. So I think now the question goes to the development banks. And there's a spoiler there because I have spoken to all the speakers, and they are working a lot on youth. So we can be reassured that this remains a priority, but how much of a priority within these competing times we're in. So Edson, let me start with you. At the African Development Bank, obviously it has a long history of investing in youth. So can you give us some main takeaways from the current youth strategy, which I believe is ending this year? And what can you tell us about the future for youth within the bank?
Thank you very much, Rim, and all the colleagues who are here. Make sure I share the right screen. Okay, do you see my screen, the first slide?
This is in presenter mode.
Oh, okay, sorry. I'll stop that. Let me select the right screen. Okay, do you see the first screen now?
Yep, that's great.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, good afternoon, colleagues. So it's a pleasure for me to be here, and I'm happy to be representing the bank and being invited to share. I believe that Sara has done really a good job of setting the scene, and especially for Africa, where it shows that that's the continent where there's the biggest increase in the labor force for the next 20, 30 years. So the African Development Bank, focusing on Africa, youth is a critical aspect that we have to take into account very seriously. So I'll take some time to share what the strategy is for the bank under the Jobs for Youth in Africa strategy, which was approved in 2016 and supposed to be ending this year. And also I'll share the midterm review that was done and the outcomes and recommendations and the future prospects. And I must say that we have worked quite closely with the ILO in terms of developing this strategy. Let's make sure. Okay, there we go. So the strategy, when it was designed back in 2016, focused on, had 3 strategic pillars. I won't go into too much of the detail, but I'll give you the highlights. You can find the strategy on the bank's website. It has 3 key pillars. The first one was on integration, the second one on innovation, and the third one on investment. In terms of integration, was really building the bank's own capacity for youth employment across our operations. Sometimes we assume that we know what needs to be done, but most of the task managers who have to design the projects, really, even the bank as a whole at that time, did not really understand very much about, youth employment. So one of the key areas was to build the bank's own capacity, and also to support the member countries in their policy in terms of highlighting, job creation and youth involvement. That was the first key pillar. The second pillar was on innovation, and this one focused on implementing or refining a number of what we call flagships, in the different areas that support SMEs and especially youth, such as agriculture, ICT, industrialization. So really, that was the second pillar, and also a number of tools, what we call the Youth Employment Index, and also an innovation and information lab to provide information and knowledge, for youth. And the third one was obviously investment, where the bank will look at both the public sector and the private sector, mostly catalyzing, private sector to capital, because you will note that most of the projects are focusing on the public sector. So really, those are the 3 pillars of the Jobs for Youth in Africa strategy at the bank. Now, one of the flagships, that focused more on the rural areas was called the Enable Youth Program. And that is the program that I was leading. And this also had 3 pillars. One on the enabling environment, working on advocacy and policy, mostly in the member countries, so that they can develop, policies on decent employment, access to land, skills development. That was the first pillar. The second pillar was on agribusiness incubation, where the program worked with a number of incubators in a particular country to provide mostly training and skills, training in agronomy, but also business skills, to be able to prepare, business plans, to understand how to run a business, and providing also mentorship. So that was the second component. And then the third component, which was complementary, was access to finance. So the youth who have gone through the training and incubation would have access to different facilities. Some were risk-sharing mechanisms such as guarantees, and then also, soft or concessional loans for the youth, depending on where they were, for the entrepreneurs, and also trying to leverage financing from the financial institutions. So those were the 3, key, I'd say the 3 key pillars of the Enable Youth Program. However, we later on, maybe a couple of years afterwards, we designed what we call the Agri-Pitch competition. And this really is an annual competition, which has gained a lot of traction. And actually, I think it's a smaller investment, but I think it provided more awareness, for youth employment and agribusiness than the main programs. So this was an annual competition where we would, select, 25 youth across the continent and, take them through a boot camp, a 2-week boot camp on pitching and innovation, running business models that have master classes on marketing and pitching skills. and also a deal room. And then at the end, they would present to a panel, and the winners would receive, some seed capital, ranging from 10,000 to about 40,000 for the different categories. So that has become quite popular, and we've run it now for 5 years. In terms of the number of projects that enable youth, we've had about projects in 18 countries with a total investment for about 670 million, and that's for the last 7 years or so. So that is, is improving. There's been a lot of interest. There's been sort of two models of these projects. There are those which are like focusing solely on youth employment and entrepreneurship, and then there are others where we have our normal, value chain projects, and it would have elements or components of youth employment and youth entrepreneurship. Now, about in 2022, we had a midterm review of the Jobs for Youth in Africa strategy, and these were some of the outcomes. Basically, the review looked at all the projects that had been implemented in the bank or approved between 2016 and 2021. There were 967 projects, and with a value of about 42.68 billion. Now, out of those 967 projects, about 50% or 479 projects had youth employment aspects to it. So about 26 billion was invested, that the bank invested during those 5 years, had some elements of youth employment. Now, out of the 479 projects, 176 had focused on primary youth employment. And that translated to close to $7 billion where the projects focused on primarily on youth employment. And then the rest, the balance of the projects, about 300 projects, what we call secondary youth employment aspects to them. So I think implementing the Jobs for Youth in Africa strategy really had an impact on the bank, but we can see that there are lessons that we have learned from that. So I'll present just a few of the lessons. One was that when the strategy was being designed, the bank was over optimistic in its expectations, especially in setting the targets, and also not taking into account the risks and also the systems in the bank that were not really aligned to implementing, the youth employment, strategy. Issues such as, human resources, we didn't have enough people to be able to implement. So that was really something that we have learned, going forward. The other key lesson was that incentives which are paired with accountability mechanisms are critical for successfully integrating youth employment. For example, we didn't have a key mechanisms to be able to measure each project, how much it has contributed to youth employment. And you'll see later on that these are some of the things that are being implemented going forward. The other one was on another key lesson was that although we focus a lot on skills, I think we found out that skills coupled with access to finance and non-financial support are critical for youth employment. So providing the youth with skills alone is not sufficient. The other key aspect was that the small-sized grants can be effective in unlocking catalytic opportunities. Actually, we found that we had a small multi-donor trust fund called the Youth Entrepreneurship and Innovation Trust Fund, which I think was only about 39 million total. But it was able really to, we were able to leverage on it to do feasibility studies, to try out innovative systems on the projects, and were able to really leverage much more resources by using these small grants. So let me touch on a few of the recommendations that came through. So some of the recommendations were really to update the strategy and its implementation plan. based on the current circumstances and resources. So really looking at the theory of change after the experience that we have gone through at the midterm, can we update it and use what we have learned, and also to really look at the risks and mitigation measures, which we believe that earlier on we had not really taken those into account. The second one was to strengthen the results measurement and learning. I think we realized that in terms of the indicators in the results framework, we could actually improve a lot on that. So going forward, we actually are going to improve on that, and also to continue to mobilize resources that support catalytic activities. So some of the trust funds, which are really not that big, but really can have a big impact. And then lastly, to strengthen the leadership and coordination of youth employment across the bank. So the governance that to make sure that youth employment is really taken seriously across the bank. It somehow, I think, raised the profile of the unit that is leading that. Now, going forward, I think the midterm review came at the right time, because we have just approved a new bank 10-year strategy, which was started last year, 2024 to 2033. And youth employment, youth skills, youth jobs is really is taken as a cross-cutting measure. So it's one of the high priority areas for that new 10-year strategy. In terms of the areas of focus, the bank will focus on skills development, looking at education and technical training, particularly in STEM and vocational fields. The areas of youth entrepreneurship, how to provide financial inclusion for youth, and focusing on tailored financial products for youth businesses. We'll look at employment creation in agribusiness. So agriculture, agribusiness is a key area over the next 10 years for youth employment and youth entrepreneurship. And also the new, more or less sort of new area of digitalization and innovation. So we're looking at, leveraging on digital platforms to be able to address youth employment, and also looking at climate smart, green jobs, and climate resilience. This is an area also where we're looking at engaging the youth. In terms of implementing some of the recommendations that came out of the midterm strategy, the bank has developed what we're calling the Youth Jobs and Skills Marker System. Basically, this will be able to systematically include youth employment in all our projects, and this is a tool that actually can be used to easier implement. So some of the key objectives of this is to have a marking and to maximize the impact. Basically, it introduces tools to assess projects for youth, job, and skills outcomes. So it will be much easier for all the task managers who are designing projects by using this marker system. And also to harmonize indicators, standardization, measurements, and improving data disaggregation for consistent reporting. Because right now you'll find that if I design a project in Ethiopia, I'll say, oh, we're going to have, create 500 jobs. But we don't really define how those jobs are. And, if somebody designs a similar project in a neighboring country in Kenya, they'll set their own, standards. So we're looking at harmonizing those, across the bank. And also mainstreaming youth consideration, basically to integrate youth and skills development as cross-cutting priorities in all bank policies and strategies as well. Now, this youth jobs and skills marker system will categorize, so all the projects in the bank will be categorized, either category 1 up to 4, depending on how they are focusing on youth employment. For example, if the primary focus of the project is on youth, jobs, and skills, that would be a category 1. Then a category 2 would be if the project is integrating, objectives on youth, jobs, and skills, and so forth. So to end, I wanted to share, a few lessons learned overall on investing in rural youth, lessons that the bank has learned over the past 10 years or so. One was that it's critical for integrated value chain approach really to unlock opportunities. So looking at holistic interventions, so providing skills, inputs, finance and markets. These are all really critical, to have a successful, youth employment and projects. The other one is that access to finance seems to be a persistent bottleneck. So coming up with tailored financial products, using blended finance is critical in order to reach the youth and so that they can actually set up either their businesses or have long-term or sustainable employment. The third one is on scaling up. Scaling requires public-private collaboration. Basically, being able to link up the youth who have gone through the training or who have received the skills to actually either agribusinesses or banks or incubators, I think is critical for sustainability. And then lastly, digitalization is really becoming a game changer in terms of providing services and training for youth, especially even at the last mile. So really it's bridging the inclusion gap. So thank you very much. I'll stop here, and then later on, I can come back for questions or clarifications. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Edson, for this very comprehensive explanation of the bank's strategy and investment in youth. I think it's, at least in my mind, is much more clear. I also really appreciated the new emphasis on trying to evaluate impact of these projects using a harmonized definition, because I think it is everyone's issue when it comes to, okay, how many jobs have you created? And you kind of randomly say, okay, I've created 500 jobs, and the definitions are not the same. And are we creating decent jobs, or what are we creating here? So I think the marker system would be looking forward to see how that's working out in terms of real measurement. I think people can start asking questions on the chat box to save some time, but I'm going to go directly to my next speaker from the Islamic Development Bank. So Ousmane, could you now tell us how the Islamic Development Bank is addressing youth employment challenges, especially rural youth, women, youth, and which are the main sectors where investments will be made to generate jobs for youth?
Yes, thank you very much, Ji-Yeun. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I shared some slides just a moment ago. Can I share my screen, Sarah? I don't know if you got my email. Sorry for the late submission, but I thought it would be good to have a look at the slides while I'm talking about it. Yeah, here we go. Right. So I can control it from here, right? Yeah, okay. Great. So yeah, thank you once again, colleagues. Again, taken from Sara Elder's statistics, given the challenges that our member countries are facing. As you can tell, the Islamic Development Bank is a financial institution that has been in operation since 1975, and we are looking after 57 member countries, and those countries, as a result, becomes one of the youth bulge, which present both an opportunity and, of course, a challenge. And again, the bank, since its establishment, we were providing support to the youths through our scholarship. So we have provided over 18,000 scholarships from undergraduate levels to PhD levels so far. But again, given our new vision and strategic alignment, we are moving towards youth in the areas of employment, skill development, you name it. So without further ado, I'll be going next slide, please. Right, so as I said, from 1975, the bank has evolved to different entities within the bank. So we have 5 other different entities within the bank that are some are focusing on food security, some are focusing on trade, some are focusing on general activities and including research. Next slide, please. Okay. Right. Again, we are headquarters in the Islamic Development Bank is in headquarters of Saudi Arabia, Jeddah, where I am based at the moment. And we have 10 regional hubs and 1 center of excellency in Malaysia. So far, we have, yes, next slide. So far, we have disposed over 189 million, in billions of dollars to our projects within our member countries. And these are also Muslims in non-member countries. And as you can see from the entities that I highlighted earlier on, we have ITFC, ICD, and ISDB. Next slide, please. Again, from the breakdown of the disbursement so far, you could see energy was the main disbursement entity, and the second one is in agriculture, which is again in line with what today's projects or today's topic is trying to address. Next slide, please. Again, the geographical nature of this distribution, we can see it's Asia, Latin America, Africa, and MENA. This is where the bulk of our member countries lies. Next. Again, our operations within the socio-economic development in member countries through Sharia compliant project financing. So we're operating in different sectors, if you like. We have development of Islamic finance, trade finance, SME, microfinancing, research, and capacity development through the technical cooperation. So these are all dealt with within various departments of the bank. Next slide. This is the new realigned strategy where we are looking to boost recovery from the COVID challenges, tackling poverty that is kind of challenging our member countries and driving green economic growth given the climate change. And if you look at the cross-cutting area, that's where the women and youth division linked to. But again, the top part is the strategy operation of the bank, where we have clean energy, sustainable multiple modal transportation, agricultural, rural development. These are our key areas of focus where we will delve into as we move forward. Next slide. Will it be good if I share my own screen, or it doesn't matter?
Do you
Okay.
prefer? Would you like to start sharing on your own
Yeah,
screen?
yeah, if possible. Yeah, let me do that. Yeah. Send a request. Okay. Okay. Is it good? Oops. No. Sorry about that. Okay. Right. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great.
You just need to put it into presenter mode.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I was saying, this is where we are earlier on. So this is the cross-cutting areas of women and youth. Again, women and youth is synonymous because we are operating within the division of women and youth empowerment. These are some of the snapshot of what we do. From the long-standing operations, we have the bank was established in 1975. However, the Women and Youth Unit was formed in 1998. From there, we have Women and Youth Division, which was just recently established 7 years ago. And this is how it evolves from then on till now. We also do have some summits. We have a youth forum. And this year, we are looking to have the 13th youth forum alongside our annual event in Algeria. And the areas of focus for women and youth is mainstreaming and implementing standalone operation in the bank. So the mainstreaming entails ensuring that the bank operation project, these are in millions, if you like, to billions, we have to ensure that these projects have earmark either in the component form or financing form towards women and youth aspect. This could be in agriculture, could be in the transportation, again, we are trying to ensure that the value chain, the food value chain, is actually integrated in these projects. And again, we do also have a standalone project that deals with directly challenges of women or both women and youth. Last year alone, our division contributed over 30 projects within our bank operation, providing training to women and youth through a thematic aspect within our hubs. We do have knowledge products on agriculture, in TVET skills, you name it. So again, coming to the flagship programs, we have what is called YDeep. This is a youth digitalization for entrepreneurship and employability. This is a program that we are working with UNDP Asia. So far, we are working with them to implement the project in Indonesia, and in a few months' time, we are looking to apply the same project in Pakistan, from there to Maldives, Indonesia. And again, we're trying to see how we can implement it to other countries, given the interest that we were able to gain from our member countries. We have what is called Iwasami, which is the Empowering West African Small Farm Medium Enterprises. We have Brave Women, Women in Sanitation, you name it. Again, the integration in key strategy and policy, so we ensure that the women and women empowerment is integrated in the bank's approved strategy. The next one here is on the women's side, so I'll skip to that, probably go to the youth side. Again, we have mainstreaming at the country strategic level. This is an annual activity where we will identify some countries and see what is their priorities, and based on that identification, we will ensure that women and youth are part of this strategy of each country, and that also gives us an opportunity to see how we can partner with existing private sectors and also with the government to ensure that women and youth are being taken into forefront, especially in the areas of food security, in the areas of health, in the areas of job creation and skill development. Mainstreaming at the project level, again, as I said, this also deals with the conducting a gender or youth analysis in those countries to see how we can drive and achieve those results based on the priority of the country. So again, we use different aggregations to identify both women and youth participation in the projects. Gender and youth mainstreaming in project design and appraisal. So again, this entails taking a mission, meeting with the various entities within each individual countries. Wherever a project is being planned to be implemented, we need to identify how they will be integrating women and youth in the project design towards implementation, and also how data will be captured to ensure that these are not just a lip service, but rather is being implemented directly. So next slide, we have another long-standing project called HOPE, Harvesting Opportunities for Poverty Eradication. This is a newly established program that has been implemented in Tunisia, and just last year I was in Ivory Coast, where we are looking to implement this program as well in the areas of SMEs, crop production, livestock. Again, it's more towards food security, if you like. So we are ensuring that the women and youth in those entities are providing relevant capacity buildings, digitalization and agriculture and financing, market linkage are all provided within this value chain aspect. In Ivory Coast, we are looking to have rice value chain, whereas in other entities, we are looking to work with the cassava value chain.
Ousmane?
Yes.
As we have also one more speaker, do you think you could wrap this up in 1 2 minutes? Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, I'll probably have to go quicker. So these are some of the operations that we have in Tunisia and also other African countries. Women textiles, this in Nigeria, that is, we are providing digital skills and life skills training to women and youth within the country. Again, flagship initiative for women and youth. Women entrepreneurs in finance initiatives. These are the budgets that has been financed towards different initiatives toward the women and youth in the WIFI. Youth development. Again, we have our youth strategy was based on 3 strategies: education, economic empowerment, and engagement. However, lately we are trying to ensure that this has been revamped towards skill development, digital skills, employability. These are the key strategy that will be part of our new post-2025 strategy. Youth development initiative within development partners. Again, this is the ecosystem studies. The digitalization that we talk about that has been dealing with in 4 countries: Pakistan, Bangladesh, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Again, this is the IDB Youth Green Skilling Accelerator. This is in collaboration with ILO, which has been running for 2 years, where we have about 6 winners, and these winners were being allocated some funding to ensure that their dreams are being implemented by ILO. If time doesn't permit, I'll have to stop somewhere. And we have skill development and education programs called STEP. The objective, again, to provide smart education to access basic education for refugees. And these are some of the programs that we had in the past 12 years within the women and youth. Programs. These are some of the studies that we have done in the past to learn more about each country before we target women and youth in the country. Just to move quickly, again, thank you very much for your time. These are some of our contacts from the Islamic Development Bank. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ousmane. This was indeed very, very rich. So we'll make sure to have, if you don't mind, we can share the slides with the participants who may request. I think the details in of the projects are quite interesting. So in the interest of time, please, for the participants, keep your questions in the chat, and we'll have some time as well for live exchange. But let me go now to Rahul. And when you talk about rural youth, we can't bypass IFAD. So Rahul, please tell us about what's happening at IFAD for what is this new or rural youth action plan that you're currently working on, and and how has the youth action plan, the old one, influenced IFAD's programming and investments? Over to you,
Excellent.
Rahul.
Thank you, Ji-Yeun. And could you just tell me how much time I might have, just so that I can
10 minutes, yeah.
10 minutes. Okay, I'm going to try my best over here. But thank you, Ji-Yeun, for that question. And actually, I wanted to start with your first initial question is, what level of commitment does IFAD have, or do these organizations have, particularly in a period of uncertainty? Second, I want to come to Sara's question, where she was talking about how do development banks respond to the aspirations of young people, particularly maybe to overcome some of the anxiety that's sort of around a little bit. Then maybe I'll center it a little bit on what we've done following the first action plan that we've had. Maybe I'll unwrap a little bit of lessons if there's time, and then I'll talk about what the next steps could be. So just to say, well, what is IFAD's commitment really? I think it's safe to say that since 2019, when we first launched our youth action plan and we systematically looked at our processes and systems to respond to young people, we've invested a lot of time, resources, and money, and we've reached systematically around 11 million young people. We expect that number to go up in the next 3 years by another 8 million people. So this is based on the trends that we've seen in 2 replenishment cycles. What we've also seen is that we put some level of commitment in these projects themselves, particularly in their log frames, by looking at how we go about measuring the employment that's either generated or supported or enhanced. And also we look at the improvement of the quality of jobs, which I'll come to a little bit later when we have the lessons learned section. I want to come to Sara's question a little bit on the aspirations, because that's a really, really important question. I think for too long, maybe also the nature of interventions has been almost a sort of box size approach towards doing, development programming. I think we're slowly turning that a little bit, and I think we've recognized there are no silver bullets, and you really do need to shoot as many arrows as you can, as many as it makes it feasible. And so just two things that we've understood in the since 2019 in our programming is one, it might not make sense specifically just to focus on enterprise development as sort of like an approach. It might make more sense to look at labor markets as well. In fact, it might make sense to look at both self-employment and wage employment together to give that sort of opportunity and options for young people to see what really fits. Knowing that not all young people can be entrepreneurs. Knowing also that very often startups, particularly amongst young people, tend to die out sometimes. And so we want to really make sure that there is some sort of stability eventually post-program on an impact level. And so we're really looking at both these angles, a sort of a hybrid approach of looking at both wage and self-employment. But it's still not enough just to look at, the farmscape, so to speak. So we've done a lot of work on-farm, we've done a lot of work on off-farm, we've done a lot on value chain, but we're now realizing that actually we need to look at the whole rural economy, and it's really a rural transformation approach that we need to take. So what kind of jobs and opportunities are also out there, maybe in something like handicraft or other sectors also that could be there, even the service sector, in terms of maybe there are some young people in rural communities who just want to be barbers, who just want to be tailors, etc. And so it's really how do we sort of account for that diversity of job opportunities as well. I think responding like this in a way which is really taking in that level of feedback loop helps us also position ourselves to basically better plan, but also to meet the aspirations of young people as best we can. So then really this now comes to the next part is, well, how does IFAD really invest in young people? I think we like to simplify this into a nutshell by saying essentially most of our investments go into assets, services, or skills. And by assets, I really mean productive resources. It's really looking at how do youth access land, because that's one of the big issues, or the productive resources. How do they have access to even inputs, fertilizers, machinery, processing equipment, etc. So really the question is, the first angle is what kind of productive resources deficits are there and how do we sort of respond to it? The second is very much on skills development, but I think Edson had made a really good point, or maybe it was Ousmane as well, that often skills alone or skills programming alone will not sort of qualify in terms of the outcomes that we want to see. And this is a lesson that even we've sort of learned over the years, where a lot of programming was just output based. So you'd have a lot of trainings, but then what, and that question of then what is really important that we sort of capture. So even with skills development, it's really looking at how does that skill then lead to some degree of outcomes that are sustainable. And then finally, on the services side, this has been mentioned by both Edson and Ousmane, is that we can't do anything without, let's say, access to finance. It's a big critical factor over here. And I think when we look at services, it's not just finance, but it's also extension services, also any sort of technical support services, business development services, that all need to sort of come together. So you triangulate your intervention, let's say, around these three boxes on assets, skills, and services. And essentially how we sort of deploy that. And this is now when we come to a very, let's say, criteria-based approach to how we design and implement youth-sensitive projects. So we call the word we use is youth-sensitive. But what does that mean, really? Essentially, what it's saying is that if you want to systematically engage with young people, first you need to do a really good analysis of the young people that you're talking about. And this will feed into a targeting strategy. And let me just emphasize this a little bit more, because targeting for us at IFAD is really crucial and important, and probably talks to Sara's point also on how do we cater to aspirations, because youth is a social construct. We're just saying the word and it's something really dynamic. We all have been youth, and no one will ever forever be a young person. And so as you're moving through life, it's really that transition on how we manage that transition from adolescence to adulthood. But within that, there is so much heterogeneity that if you are to target a 30-year-old male who already has some business skills and is already, it'll be a very different intervention approach you'll do to someone who's probably 17 years old, has not really had any experience working at all, is a young woman who has an idea. And so you really need to account for this heterogeneity, within young people. So that really talks to the targeting. Who exactly are we investing in? And then accordingly, we sort of like put in interventions that respond to those target groups, accounting for the, let's say, social positioning within this whole target group. Then we sort of like look, once we have a targeting, is what kind of interventions do we respond? So here's where we also lay out a little bit of what would be the intervention pathway. Well, how will the theory of change explicitly pull out what problem have we found out about this subgroup of young people and how we aim to address it? Then we sort of come into the third part of this sort of criteria definition of youth sensitivity, which is, okay, how do we keep ourselves accountable to that? So here's where we really look at the results framework. We look at the log frames. One of the things that we put is that in all our log frames, all the sort of, let's say, output indicators and outcome indicators that are at least percent-based should be disaggregated by young and not young, just so that we know like how much of the intervention is going. But one key mandatory indicator that we want in there is on the employment effects. You know, how many new jobs or improved jobs have, let's say, IFAD been able to contribute to. And we'll put particular emphasis on the word contribution and not attribution per se. And so all of this, and then finally, the fourth part of the criteria of the definition of youth sensitive is that we need to evidence some amount of how much budget allocation and how much human resources are going to be in this project to respond to youth needs. So all these things put together, this is what defines youth sensitivity in IFAD. This is how we design projects, and this is eventually how they sort of also end up into the implementation scale. So I'm mindful of time. I want to come very quickly to some of the lessons learned, and I've tried to sort of also sandwich a little bit on the targeting issues. But I think for us, one of the things that has really come out is this issue on the ecosystem approach. I know it's become a little bit of a buzzword, but we're realizing that there's not one, let's say, entity or institution that can do this alone. We really need to work with different actors. And so this is really working with public actors, but also private actors and civil society. Private entities in particular have become very key to sort of facilitating this whole sort of employment-based approach for youth programming. I think one of the things in that we've learned as a lesson is really what are the incentives that we can bring in to the private sector. And I'm saying this because if we're going to look at job matching and if we're going to look at labor markets and where young people can go, then we really need the private sector sort of on board. But the crucial question is then what are those incentives that we can offer? So here's where we've been sort of experimenting also with a lot through this Agri-Business Hubs program, which we've been running together also with the ILO. And it's really looking at what kind of subsidies can we bring in, or maybe how can we sort of like, make sure that they can sort of come on board and sort of like putting together the curriculum. What are the skills gaps exactly, and how do we sort of cater to curriculums that respond to that, etc. So I think that was one crucial thing that has really sort of come out as a big lesson is really we take an ecosystem approach, stop with just the skills development programming, but really make it more market responsive. If we're going to do entrepreneurship building, then really look at how we can look at both startups, but also look at accelerating existing businesses. Accelerating existing businesses also has its positives and gains because one, we're kind of a little bit more confident on the stability of the business itself. And so now it's really about expansion, but there's a spillover effect because there are induced jobs. And so now what you'll have is probably a bigger business, but with more job opportunities within that business. So really looking at acceleration as well is something that we are keen and interested on working with. I think also some of the things that we found is that I think Ousmane and Edson also brought this out, is really the access to finance is the real bottleneck over here. And I think there are two. One is like, we can look at sort of how we put in, again, incentives in the projects for young people to access finance, maybe through grant matching, etc. But we really need to look a little bit more sustainably post-project. How does the whole ecosystem environment that includes microfinancial institutions or financial intermediaries on the ground get involved in this beyond the scope of the project? Like how do young people get to be perceived as bankable? And that's really where we really need to start working with MFIs to look at how we can develop youth-friendly sort of loan products or credit products, etc. And then also on access to finance, that's on the supply side, but very much on the demand side is also how do we build up those skills in years where, sort of business development services and things like that sort of come into place. I just want to say, I'll pause here because I know 2 minutes left, Ji-Yeun, but I want to just say that this year we recommit actually IFAD to renewing our youth action plan, and we want to sort of take it a little bit to the next level. And so particularly the key focus is to align with IFAD's 13 replenishment, which is just come into effect this year. And there are 3 priority areas there. The first is on climate and biodiversity. So we really want to center a lot of the emphasis on green jobs within this action plan as well. The second is on private sector, where we really want to try and see and build on some of the success that we've had through some of these flagship models, how we engage better with the private sector, how we look at access to finance a little bit better. And the third is fragility, where we're also interested in looking in fragile contexts. How do we look at the issue of youth unemployment, seeing how broken labor markets are, seeing how weak the private sector is? How do we come in and what do we do over there? So those are sort of like, let's say, three elements that we are sort of taking forward right now. I'm sure there's things that I might have missed out, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm happy to come in for the question answer session. Back to you, Ji-Yeun.
Yes, Rahul, thank you for this, and thank you for a comprehensive explanation of IFAD past, present, and future on youth. I want to go back maybe to Sarah's question about why companies are not investing. But when I hear the three speakers today, where you are well prepared in a very comprehensive programming for youth, both on the supply side, but the demand side as well. I don't know, I feel hopeful that companies will start investing in hiring young people. Let me now spend the next maybe 10 minutes to open the floor to questions. Yes, please, Chidinma. Go ahead.
All right, great. Thank you all very much for this section. It's amazing listening to what everybody here, every organization is working on, particularly in respect to youth employment in general. My name is Chidinma Eze. I am the YPAD Nigerian country representative, and I am also the founder of Farmcast, which is an agricultural HR firm where we basically connect young people out there to employment opportunities in the agricultural sector. And we've been doing this for roughly 4 years now. And I was really more intrigued with everybody's presentation because it speaks volume to what I've been working with, particularly when it comes to rural youth. I'll tell people that I've had to work the whole part. I've worked as a laborer on farm. I've worked as a farm manager. I've also had agronomist before I founded my own firm. So I could see that I know the pains of each and every of those people. And one of the major challenges that we've had to deal with, or we've seen so far, particularly working with rural youth, is youth generally in the agricultural sector, is there is no clear career path that ensures that as they come into the sector, they are able to grow. The agricultural sector, particularly I speak more in respect to Nigeria now, is not clearly defined. So you see that a lot of firms out there do not want to pay for some particular roles higher beyond a particular regime and all of those things. And secondly, in working with rural youth now, we've seen a lot of challenges, particularly when it comes to getting them employment opportunities. So one of the things that we do majorly, because there's a large deficit when it comes to youth employment in the agricultural sector and staff shortage in the agricultural sector. In previous years, we've had to bring staffs from neighboring countries like Benin Republic, but because of Naira devaluation, it's been very, very worse, particularly in the southern part of Nigeria. And so one of the things that my firm does is to get youths who are unemployed in the northern part of the country, particularly in areas where there have been conflicts, they've had to fight, and then they do not have access to their land, and they are not doing anything. And then we try to integrate them with employment opportunities down south here. And so far, it's been great. So my question now is, I look forward to really working with each and every organization that I've worked here, that I've spoken here. IFAD to African Development Bank, ILO, and every organization. Recently, we are launching a job market app where every agricultural opportunities that exist in the continent can easily be accessed by everybody, such that way it is easier for you. You don't have to start skimming the net to be able to access some of these employment opportunities, one. And also we help firms to recruit and train staff to be able to grow generally. So for me, my question is basically for an organization like myself, and looking for at where I also come from, which is working with YPAD Nigeria, particularly in respect to development operations upskilling and improving agri students and young agripreneurs in the agricultural sector? How can we work together? How can we collaborate together? So I know when IFAD was presenting, they talked more about working with different actors in the sector. Now talking from the private entity end and talking from the NGO end now, how do we work together? How do we reach out to you, for instance, and see that yes, you are driving this, you have this passion, but again, we have the access to the ground root here and see what is working on and be able to collaborate together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chidinma, for bringing the Nigerian experience. And it's always nice to hear, from youth, agriculture, professionals, their point of view. And I'm sure there will be opportunities to collaborate in Nigeria with the country representatives. But do you, anyone wants to react to this? Or I do have also a question in the chat box, which was on this lost it, which was on this risk. Sorry, let's go back. I think it was a question for Edson, but I think anyone can answer about these financial risk. Financial instruments that have been working successfully for young people and youth-led MSMEs in Africa. Edson, do you want to answer some of these questions that were asked to you? I think it's interesting for everyone to hear.
Yes, thank you very much. I think I've tried to answer to some extent in the chat, but you can't really exhaust it. But yes, there are some products that have worked, but it depends on the youth, where they are in their, running their business, and as rightly said, that they're quite a challenge, to implement some of these or use some of these facilities. For example, for the youth in the rural areas, what has really worked to some extent is, smaller grants or concessional, loans through financial institutions that we're working with on some of our projects. However, when we talk about guarantees, what I've found from experience has worked is providing guarantees to businesses or agribusinesses now that provide onward services to the youth MSMEs. For example, if there's a seed distributor, or an input distributor who's providing inputs to youth who are in the agriculture business, who are running their small horticulture areas. Now, if we provide a guarantee to that agribusiness, then it will be easier for them to provide now inputs, on credit to the youth MSMEs. So it can be at different levels. But this has worked quite well for us in Sudan, and also I think with the advent of more digitalization, especially financial services through digital architecture or digital platforms, I think it will be easier. We're working on a digital platform, called DFAS in a number of countries. That's digital identity for agricultural services. In that aspect, it would be easier to provide some kind of financial services to the youth in the rural areas. I'll stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Luz Sekelo, could you introduce yourself and ask your question very quickly, as we have maybe just one more minute, and then we'll wrap up. Okay. Please go ahead for your question.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Luz Sekelo Nku, and I'm from Tanzania, and I'm a farmer and entrepreneur. For the last 4 years, I've been employing at least 25 to 30, mostly young men and women. And I've been hearing that there's, Africa is a future in terms of young people, population that are ready for work. But honestly, on the ground, I've been having a challenge of working with the young people. Most of them are lacking morals for work, the soft skills, being punctual, listening, things like that. So I'm very curious, are we aware of this and what are we doing to address this? Because it seems like there's almost a generational gap. I could work with someone, say, above 40 and it will be just fine. But anyone of my age, there's always a challenge of just a simple thing of being punctual or just listening, being honest, those skills. What's in the works to address those kind of challenges?
Thank you for the question, Lusekelo. Maybe, Janetta, would you from FAO, would you like to answer the question?
Hello, good afternoon. I hope I'm audible. My name is Janetta Colucci, and I'm a social policy officer working on youth employment with the FAO in the Regional Office for Africa. I think what the last point was a really important one about really looking at designing our interventions in a much more holistic manner and not to have tunnel vision on a particular aspect of youth empowerment. And that is something that at least FAO we've tried to introduce in some of our projects by introducing both soft skills and in some cases also life skills component in addition to just the technical managerial and business skills, because we have to look at it as a whole package, as that we are supporting the entire individual and not just a very specific aspect of their situation. And especially in certain in certain contexts, Rahul mentioned in context of fragility, where things are really broken down, where we can't just focus on maybe agricultural skills or other forms of technical skills, but we also need to look at what has been missing, what has been taken away due to the particular context, and then filling that gap. And that may not necessarily just be FAO or one specific organization, but also to work with partners who can fill in the gaps where we don't necessarily have a comparative advantage. So I think the issue of the soft skills and life skills is definitely a really important component that we cannot leave out in our interventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Janetta, for bringing your experience from FAO. We have gone over time, and I don't know if any of the speakers, including Sara, would like to say the final words. Otherwise, I'll pass on to Jenna for the challenging task of wrapping this up quickly.
I can come in very quickly and just say that I'm appreciative of the dialogue so far and to hear how active the banks are. But I feel you, Lusekelo, when you talk about the challenge of, in a certain sense, it comes down to attitude, right? And we are absolutely aware of the importance of soft skills and investing in soft skill development at an early age. So the hope would be that, when we do this holistically, then the emerging generation can be a little bit better trained in that regard. But you do wonder if we have a generation lost because they just haven't. It's harder to get them now to understand the attitudes about work. And the productivity attitude that they need to have. But that's not to say that we can't try and embed, as you said, Carlota, it's about integrated approach, putting everything on the table. When you have a training, you have to teach the technical skills and the soft skills and the entrepreneurship skills and talk about the right to work all together while you have them with you. It's not easy, it's expensive, but you have to put all of those eggs in that basket while you have these young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Jenna.
Super. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today, for all the participants, of course, but also our great panelists today. I think we had a really lively discussion about young people. And coming from a youth organization myself, Young Professionals for Agricultural Development, we know that these things are really big challenges. And I can't summarize in just a couple minutes everything that was said today. But we know that youth are systemically disadvantaged, right? Which means we're also a systemic opportunity for folks to use. And I heard that emphasized over and over here today. We need to go beyond looking at unemployment and look at the whole story. So decent, secure incomes, maybe from employment, but maybe from entrepreneurship, other sources. And looking at skills alone is not sufficient. And we heard that even in just our last question and answer session, that even hard skills aren't enough. It's really about soft skills. It's really about networking and creating some of those mentorship experiences for young people as well. So when we're looking at youth aspirations, really bring all these things into it so that you can really get the whole picture, put a young person in the driver's seat, because that's what's going to motivate a lot of times that young person. So really considering how young people want to shape their work. I'll end with a call to action, and that is, of course, to keep up your great work with young people, because we really are the future, but we're also the work of today. And please join us for our next webinars, which are probably going to focus on these finance topics as well. We're yet to determine the exact topics, but we'll be discussing that in our next working group meetings. And so we really look forward to the next discussions with all of you. And thank you so much for being here today. Ciao, ciao. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.